Thank you for coming. And we're honored our speaker is joining us too. We had hoped to have a very important hearing today, but out of respect to Bob Dole, we are having it in January. But thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it. Maybe should I keep this on or take it?
You can wait 1 second and do this on the live stream.
What?
Wait 1 second and do this on the live stream.
I don't know if the people are going to come in and stand around us or
Yes.
what.
I'll get them.
Where's everybody? There she is.
Oh, our distinguished speaker, we're honored to have you in our meeting room. Are other speakers coming out?
Yes, I hope. All the speakers coming up?
Where are they?
I think they just ran to you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honor to have you here.
It's just simple. They're just crooks. No, they're just, I mean, it's just simple.
Okay. Good morning. I want to thank everybody for being here today. I'm Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney. We had expected to have a hearing, but due to respect with former presidential candidate Dole, we are putting that off until January and just having this press conference. We're very honored to have in the Oversight and Reform Committee, not only my colleagues, but the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And we are here to unveil our committee's finding from our 3-year investigation on drug prices. These shocking findings highlight the urgent need for the reforms in the Build Back Better Act to finally tackle skyrocketing prescription drug prices. The committee's investigation has pulled back the curtain on drug companies' unfair, unjustified, always increasing drug prices. First, we found that drug companies target American patients for price increases, in large part because Medicare is prohibited from negotiating for lower prices. At the same time, the drug companies maintained or cut prices for the rest of the world. Secondly, our investigation shows that the pharmaceutical industry deploys anti-competitive tactics to preserve their monopolies and prevent cheaper alternatives from coming to market. And third, our research shows that Big Pharma's favorite talking point, that lower prices would harm innovation, is blatantly false. Today's report contains new information about Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, and Sanofi, 3 companies that collectively control 90% of the global insulin market. The committee found that these companies repeatedly raise prices on their life-saving products and use strategies to maintain monopoly pricing and delay competition that would have lowered prices. This included applying for dozens of additional patents, product hopping, and shadow pricing, for manufacturers raise their prices in lockstep. The disturbing reality is that insulin prices in the United States are the highest in the world for a drug that has been in existence for more than a century. In fact, it was given by the scientists to the country because it was so life-saving. But now prices have raised to over $1,200 a month for insulin that is needed for diabetic patients. The Build Back Better bill would cap it at $35 a month. These insulin manufacturers should not have the power to push medications out of reach for millions of Americans, like Mindy Salango, a patient with type 1 diabetes. She was forced to ration insulin because of skyrocketing prices, and she is now with us today as an advocate for patients. She will be sharing her story later. Let me be clear, America's patients and families deserve better. No one should have to choose between their medication and household expenses like rent and groceries. And we know that Congress already has had a solution. The Build Back Better Act would finally empower Medicare to negotiate directly with drug companies to bring down the prices of the costliest medications. Our investigation found that taxpayers could have saved more than $25 billion on just 7 drugs over 5 years if Medicare had been able to negotiate directly with pharmaceutical companies as other federal care programs have. We also found that Medicare negotiations could have saved more than $16 billion on just 3 frequently used insulin products over a 7-year period. The Build Back Better Act will also ensure that drug prices can't rise faster than inflation and would cap out-of-pocket expenses for drugs, including a $35 cap on insulin. In one of the internal documents we obtained by one of the executives at one drug company, they joked that all they wanted for Christmas was a big price increase on their drugs. But to most Americans, this is not a joke. And as we approach this holiday season, there would be no greater gift we could give to the American people than to allow government to negotiate lower prices in Medicare and make drugs more affordable and available for them. Before I turn it over to our distinguished speaker, I want to thank the committee staff. Most of all of the staff on the Oversight Committee worked on this report for over 3 years. And as many of you in this room know, this investigation was launched by my predecessor. The room is now named for him, the great former chairman, Elijah Cummings. His work lives on, and I am proud to have continued this investigation for American patients and families. And now it's my honor to introduce a great speaker who has helped push this Build Back Better law and other transformational bills. Thank you so much, Speaker Pelosi, for everything you do and for being with us today.
We've been working together for a very long time. Thank you, Carolyn Maloney, for your great leadership, bringing us together not only here, but following the work of Elijah Cummings, for whom this room and this bill, part of some of these bills have been named. He was a great champion for the people, for the children. This issue is one that has been, this is a kitchen table issue for the American people. I want to say what an honor it is to join you, Madam Chair, to join Jan Schakowsky, who's been relentless on this issue, Mark Desaulnier coming over from his committee jurisdictions, transportation, education, and the rest. And I know that Frank Pallone will be joining us shortly, and thank him for his leadership. But so many members have been involved in this for a long time. Let me just place this a little bit in time as I acknowledge Brad Woodhouse and protect our care and how much this cost of prescription drugs has been part of lowering cost of health care. And Jen Taylor from Families USA, they helped us pass the Affordable Care Act and save the Affordable Care Act. And David Mitchell, Patients for Affordable Drugs, thank you for your leadership and your organization's leadership as well. Let me just put this in a little perspective historically. When in 2005 and 2006, when Democrats were running to take back the House, one of our primary issues was to lower the cost of prescription drugs. We had a new direction for America, 6 for 06. 6 bills that we would pass in the first 100 hours of the new Congress. Hours, not days. We did in the House. 5 of them became law. 1 of them did not survive, needing the 60 votes in the Senate, enabling the Secretary of HHS to negotiate for lower drug prices. This fight has been going on since the Medicare Part D legislation, which gave away the store to pharma, and they got used to having the store to themselves. So the research that has been done here, the documentation of how dollars are spent in contrast to the statements that are made. If we do this, if the Secretary can negotiate for lower prices for America's working families, it's going to have an impact on innovation. Not true. We're spending billions of dollars on innovation. Just look at our appropriations bill that we're hoping to pass in the next few weeks, and it's one of the biggest increases in innovation at the National Institutes of Health, continuing that over and over again. The biblical power to cure, that basic scientific medical research, so important to what the private sector does in their important role. But what we see on TV are these ads, so they spend so much money, pharma does, on ads on TV, so everybody wants what they saw on TV, and that increases the cost to the taxpayer and the consumer, to the benefit of pharma. And what they are doing in terms of what you've released in the previous, in the course of these reports, in terms of their own buybacks and CEO pay and pharma aggrandizement in terms of money, is stunning. And yet they have the nerve to say, but for a better price for the American consumer, we would be able to do more innovation. I bless them for their innovation. God bless science for being, again, the biblical power to cure. But let's not take it out on America's working families. I always tell the story of what you hear out there in the public. And one of the stories that was so moving to me is a man came up to me in Michigan, it was, crying. He was crying. Grown man crying because he could not pay the prescription drug bills for his wife, who was bedridden with an illness. He said, I feel that I can't keep my promise in sickness and in health to care for her because of the cost of prescription drugs. And we all know the exploitation of the American consumer, preying on Medicare, preying on the consumer while giving lower prices overseas, and we're paying 3-4 times as much consumers in our countries. This is outrageous. But you know what? They're brazen. And I know them. I communicate with them and make my views known to them about their brazenness. In some states, they're trying to do some similar things to lower the cost of drugs in their states, and they are fortifying with lobbyists and lawyers and everything to just get everybody in their camp, PR and all the rest, so they can continue to prey on Medicare and prey on consumers. So this report is so very important because it's a documentation of what has happened. It's a presentation on how the highest cost drugs lose Medicare savings. And it's an opportunity cost for those savings to go to help other provisions of Medicare. So I'm very happy that in Build Back Better we have historic legislation. It's the most historic in a century for families, workers, seniors, and for all Americans in many respects. But we look forward to a vote soon in the Senate, hopefully very soon, and so that the President's vision for the future can be fulfilled. And a very important part of it is not what happens at corporate America, corporate table, but what happens at America's kitchen table. This is the issue of preeminence across our country. I gave you one example. I can give you many more. And so we have a very special VIP guest here today, Mindy Salongo, who will tell her story. And that's more eloquent than anything that we could say, document, or provisions we can say are in bills. So I look forward to, for all of us to hear her story. But this is a situation where now we can end pharma's outrageous price hikes. That's what we have to do. Finally give Medicare the power to negotiate lower prices. That's in the bill. Not as robust as I would have liked, but nonetheless in the bill. Capping annual cost of the pharmacy at $2,000, not a penny more, and ensuring that no one with diabetes pays more than $35 a month for insulin. All of these priorities for us, but especially for the President of the United States. So together we look forward to making a big difference in the lives of America's families and a big difference in a business model of these companies to just eke out with greed the biggest possible profits at the expense of America's working families who have to pay more, at the expense of the taxpayer who has to pay more for benefits in terms of Medicare and the rest. But we'll just be relentless. Pharma, we will be relentlessly on your case for the people. Now, I'll be pleased, do I yield back to the chair? Madam Chair, let us thank the chair for her doggedness, like a bulldog, on the heel of pharma. She's never going to give up on this, and for that we are very grateful. Thank you.
Our next speaker.
I thank you for not having a hearing because of Senator Dole, and after Mindy, I'm going to have to go over to the
I
farewell
know.
service for
You
him. So
honored us
forgive
with
me
your
for a
presence
minute.
and
Thank you.
leadership. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Mindy Sulango. She is a patient advocate with type 1 diabetes from Morgantown, West Virginia. Thank you so much for coming. Mindy, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Chairwoman. It's an honor to be here today. My name is Mindy Sulango. I'm from Morgantown, West Virginia, and 27 years ago, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I could go in and tell you all about how that affected my life, and it did. It changed my whole career course. I now have to look for jobs and will only be able to take jobs that have insurance due to the high cost of prescription drugs and insulin that I have to take, as well as all of the supplies and equipment that I have to use. I decided to become an advocate because when I found myself as a single mother, I didn't have very good insurance, and I found that I was paying outrageous amounts of money in order to live. And I had a young daughter, and in order to keep food on the table and a roof over our head, sacrifices had to be made. And oftentimes, that was my insulin. The average lifespan for a diabetic without their insulin is 24 to 48 hours. So you can imagine if you walk into a pharmacy and your card declines because you don't have enough money to pay for your insulin, the fear that you walk out with. I'm lucky. I had some support and was able to fall upon my mother and my sister, who are amazing. But we shouldn't have to do that. We shouldn't have to go to the kindness of others. I shouldn't have to ask my single mother or my sister, who is also a single mother, to help me out with those bills. I should be able to provide for myself. I work full-time and I work hard. So, as my situation improved, I'm now able to afford my medication a little bit better. It's still tight. We still go paycheck to paycheck. I decided to advocate. And as I have become an advocate over the past year and become more visible, in the past year, I've been asked 6 times over social media if I had extra insulin or supplies that I could spare. And I have met people in a parking lot to provide them with insulin and supplies that they need to survive. We're not criminals, and we're meeting in parking lots like we're criminals. This isn't healthcare. This is not healthcare. This is survival of the richest. The drug companies have stated that they have made record profits during a pandemic. They have made record profits at the expense of the lives of diabetics and other folks who have chronic illnesses that need their life-saving medication to survive. Type 1 International did a study before the pandemic that said 1 in 4 diabetics in America were rationing their insulin due to cost. Studies are coming in that during the pandemic, that has raised to 1 in 2 diabetics who are rationing their insulin due to cost. Again, I state, this is not health care. The Build Back Better bill is amazing and is probably the most transformational piece of legislation that will have passed in my lifetime. However, the fight doesn't stop. We still have to ensure that the uninsured and the underinsured are protected, because even with the Build Back Better Act, they will still pay full price at the counter. I hope none of you ever have to go to the pharmacy and walk out without your life-saving medication. I hope you never feel that terror, because our only option is to pay or die. So I thank everyone who has worked so hard for this. We need this. It will save lives. Thank you. Thank you very much.
My friend Jan Schakowsky is a leader on this issue, a leader on this report. She is co-chair of the House Democratic Caucus Task Force on Aging and Families. Thank you for being here, Jan. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Carolyn Maloney, for your tireless work on the House Oversight and Reform Committee, for bringing today what is a national scandal. What we see is an industry that saves lives, has the capacity to do that, gouging American consumers. And I also want to thank our leader, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who, again, has been tireless in fighting for lower drug prices. And now we achieved it in the House and pretty soon in the Senate through the Build Back Better bill. The report that is being released today confirms, once again, the endless greed of the pharmaceutical industry, big pharma. And as we speak, Americans are, in fact, not only struggling, but dying because they can't afford their medications. During the whole issue around insulin, we actually had names of people who didn't make it. They tried it on their own, a college student that we all read about that couldn't afford his medication. He wanted to try and do it on his own, and he did not succeed, and he lost his life. Americans are paying 2 to 3 and sometimes 4 times as much for their medications as people around the world, the exact same medications. As the chairwoman said, American consumers are being targeted. And 90% of Americans, that means Republicans, Democrats, everybody, are sick and tired, according to the polling, of paying the prices that they are. Now, these rich corporations say that they need these higher prices because the cost of research and development. But the truth is, according to previous information from the studies that Carolyn Maloney's committee did, the top 14 drug companies spent $56 billion more on stock buybacks, dividends for their investors, and CEO pay than they did on research and development in the last 5 years alone. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so proud to be joining Chair Maloney in legislation that she'll be introducing very soon to finally ensure transparency, real transparency, in pharmaceutical R&D costs. And I am proud that the House voted to pass the Build Back Better bill that finally will provide the kind of relief you heard, that there will be limits on how much pharmaceutical companies can raise their prices. There'll be a cap on how much seniors have to pay, and at long last, we will begin real negotiations. So I just want to thank all the people who are here today, the real life stories of people who are suffering, people who are dying, and let's make the progress that we need to do. And finally, to hold big pharma accountable. Probably the most profitable industry in the country, which means probably in the world today, at the cost of the lives of Americans. That time is coming to an end, and I yield back.
Thank you so much, Jan. Brad Woodhouse, who is the Executive Director of Product Care, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Maloney, and I want to thank everybody here. And Mindy, I want to thank you. Protect Our Care has worked so closely with Mindy. Mindy's been such a big part of our work in West Virginia. I think everybody knows why we're working in West Virginia. Been such a big part of our advocacy efforts there. You know, Speaker Pelosi did a good job. She went through what's in the bill. I just want to talk about a couple of things. The Oversight Committee. It's so appropriate, Chair Maloney, that the Oversight Committee is taking the lead on this issue, because the practices of the pharmaceutical companies are corrupt. They may not be corrupt legally, but they're corrupt morally. The passage of this provision in Part D was corrupt. It was a corrupt bargain with the pharmaceutical companies. People wonder why, Congresswoman Schakowsky, you and your husband and me, and we fought to repeal Part D. After it passed, people said, well, it's giving seniors drugs. No, it's giving the pharmaceutical companies a windfall, and it has ever since. I'm going to get a little point of personal privilege. Sure. I'm going to get slightly political here. Since that provision was put in place, the only times that a House of Congress has passed legislation to repeal the ban and to give Medicare the power to negotiate for lower drug prices is when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker and when Democrats had the gavels in the United States House of Representatives. And that is what has happened again with Build Back Better. It is this moment, there's a transformational opportunity to do all of the great things that President Biden and Democrats have advocated for in Build Back Better, and none is more transformational than the health care provisions. None are more popular than the health care provisions. And among the health care provisions, nothing is more popular and more urgent than giving Medicare the power to negotiate for lower prescription drug prices, than capping the cost of insulin to $35 a month for people with insurance, giving Medicare the power to negotiate for lower drug prices for all those products. I mean, it's not just insulin. It's glucose monitors. It's Lancets. It's needles. It's the whole panoply of things. And those things can be accomplished with Build Back Better. And those things can be accomplished with the legislation that's included in there to give Medicare the power to negotiate lower drug prices and cap insulin costs. And why is it happening? It's because Democrats are in charge. It's because Democrats are getting things done. I'm tired of reading about how Democrats are in disarray and Democrats are in trouble. Democrats passed the American Rescue Plan. We've had record job creation. Democrats, because Democrats are in charge, Infrastructure Week is no longer a joke, it's a reality. And because Democrats are in charge, come next year, we're going to see people's health care costs go down. We're going to see health care costs for prescription drugs go down. We're going to see health care costs for premiums go down. We're going to expand coverage to millions of people across this country who Republicans said, we're not going to let you have it. We're not going to let you have it because we don't like Obamacare in those states that didn't expand Medicaid. And this is because Democrats have the gavels and because Democrats are getting things done. This week, did Republicans hold a press conference and feature a Mindy Salango to talk about lowering drug prices? No. They held a press conference to protest the jailed rioters who incited an insurrection on this country. They're not doing the work of the American people that need lower drug prices. They're not doing the work of the American people who are facing all these inflationary pressures. You know what we can do to lower people's prices tomorrow? Pass Build Back Better. Senate, pass Build Back Better. It'll lower drug prices, lower child care costs, lower premiums. And you know what? Get it done. The House has done its job. Chair Maloney has done her job. Speaker Pelosi has done her job. Congresswoman Chakowski has done her job. It's time for the Senate to do its job. Pass this bill, lower prices for the American people, stop this type of crap that is occurring because pharmaceutical companies have been given the store. Stop it now. Thank you for having me.
Boy, bravo, bravo. And he's followed by one of our strongest supporters for the Build Back Better Act and the research that we've done to lower drug prices, Representative Mark DeSalle from California. He's a member of the Oversight Committee and has contributed greatly to this effort. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
Well, first, I want to thank Brad for speaking like a San Francisco liberal. Nice going. Well, wait, we'll find you a district. I want to thank you all, and I really want to thank the speaker, and I want to thank my colleagues. Carolyn's been indomitable on this, Jan, similarly, and Mindy, wonderful. I'm sorry you've had to go through this, but there was a point, and there's a point for you being here to tell your story. And unfortunately, there are millions of Americans who have similar stories, and I'm one of them. 7 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 chronic lymphosemic leukemia. In the Middle Ages, they called blood cancer the black bilge. During World War I, the Department of Defense started the basic research that led to the medicines that keep me alive. They were looking at why the blood samples from sailors, American sailors and soldiers, looked very similar when they had experienced mustard gas from the Germans to blood cancer. Those investments continued at the NIH and the American Cancer Institute. One of the drugs in this report I'm grateful for. It's kept me alive. We've had the CEO of this company here in this room to talk about this. This drug, embrutamine, this package in my hand, cost Americans, list price, $24,000, right here. In the European Union, Great Britain, France, Germany, it's about $11,000. But that's the list price. Trying to find out what the true cost to Americans versus the rest of the world has been daunting because these numbers are so difficult to follow. Deliberately, they obfuscate. They think we're going to give up because it's too complicated. As Americans, as journalists, as policymakers, we're not. In Australia, this same pill that cost $405, and by the way, CLL is the most common form of blood cancer. And one of the triggers to it, in my research, is benzene, which is used in the mining industry. And because I live near a quarry, when we have to look at those things, why did my 13th chromosome broke? We don't know for sure, but we're going to find out that those products in the mining industry in West Virginia and the quarry right down the street from my house, was it a trigger? So to any representative in Congress, we might want to look at that. So we can do better, much better. The cost of this drug to Americans and to Medicare and Medicaid is astronomical. Build Back Better will change that. I get frustrated with some of my colleagues. I'm so happy that we were able to pass the bill out of the House, but we have to pass this bill. It's a national shame. In this committee, Carolyn Maloney and I and others, and Elijah Cummings, worked to draw attention to the Sackler family and Purdue Pharma. They are egregious, and they're the most egregious of the culture and the pharmaceutical industry. But unfortunately, they're not uncommon. They're just the most egregious. And that's why we're going to stay at this. And lastly, Elijah Cummings, when he was dealing with his illness, we used to commiserate about this. But Elijah would always say to us, on a number of issues, we can do better than this. American Congress can do much better than the current situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jen Taylor, Senior Director of Federal Relations, Families USA.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Maloney. Not quite as tall as the Congressman. Thank you to Madam Speaker, Chairwoman Maloney, Representatives Schakowsky and Desaulniers, members of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform, and all of your really hardworking staff, and as well as my fellow advocates, particularly Mindy. It's truly an honor to be here with all of you this morning. Starting under the leadership of Chairman Cummings and continuing to this day, the work of this committee over the last 2 years has been striking. These reports lay out in black and white what we all suspect is happening, but didn't previously have real insight into. Report after report, company after company, the names of the drugs differ, but the story's the same. I'm not going to rehash all the numbers today. Hopefully you've seen them in the report, and we've got some right here, and quite frankly, they're infuriating. But what's truly sickening is contrasting the stories of pharmaceutical company pricing abuses with the stories of real people in America who deal with the consequences of these abusive behaviors every single day. While Maureen, an 80-year-old woman from Georgia, had to give up food, limiting herself to 1 meal a day and filling up on water in order to afford medication to treat her blood clots, Big Pharma's making record profits and paying their executives billions of dollars in compensation and bonuses. While Mary Alice from New York saw the price of her clinically prescribed medication to manage her severe and debilitating depression jump from $100 to $450 through her Medicare Advantage plan, Big Pharma is taking advantage of the federal law that currently prohibits Medicare from negotiating for a fair deal and specifically targeting the US for higher prices than the rest of the world. And while Antoinette from Ohio continues to mourn her firstborn daughter, Antavia, who died at just 22 years old after she aged out of government assistance for her drug costs and began rationing her insulin, Big Pharma is playing games with their R&D budgets, not to innovate, but to suppress competition while continuing to raise prices. It's inexcusable. Inexcusable. And only Congress can put us on the path to rectifying the situation by passing the Build Back Better Act now. Of course, this bill alone will not solve everything. Big drug companies spent billions of dollars in lobbying and political contributions to make sure of that. But let's be clear, it's a giant leap forward. It's a statement of our values, of living up to who we say we are as a country. It means choosing an America where you no longer have to rely on setting up a GoFundMe to afford your insulin, or come to a press conference on Capitol Hill to beg for your life. It's a commitment to Maureen and Mary Alice, to Antoinette and Antavia, to Mindy, and to so many others, that we see them, that their lives matter, that we're not just sorry to hear about their stories, but we're actively fighting for them, and that this is just the beginning. I urge every single senator to follow the House lead and vote for the Build Back Better Act, and to do it now, without further delay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. And the last speaker is David Mitchell, President and Founder, Patients for Affordable Drugs. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Chairwoman Maloney and Representatives Schakowsky and Desaulniers for your leadership. Thank you very much, Mindy. Thank you for your advocacy and for traveling all this way today to tell your story. It has real power. Today, the House Oversight Committee wraps up an investigation documenting how drug companies target U.S. citizens with outrageously high drug prices and how they increase those prices relentlessly to hit profit targets and trigger executive bonuses. As a result, we Americans pay 3 times what other wealthy nations pay for the exact same drugs. Finally, Congress is poised to take action and change this. The drug price reforms in Build Back Better, as the Speaker said, are not perfect. We wish they went farther. But when this bill is signed into law, It will mark a truly historic shift in U.S. policy and deliver long overdue relief to millions of Americans. For the first time, the drug industry's unilateral power to dictate prices will be broken. Medicare will be authorized to negotiate, and we will limit price increases and out-of-pocket costs. I have a dog in this fight. I have an incurable blood cancer. It's called multiple myeloma, and prescription drugs are keeping me alive, literally. Right now, I'm on a 4-drug combination with a list price of more than $900,000 a year. Just one of those drugs under Medicare Part D cost me $15,000 out of pocket last year. It's going to be more than that this year. Now, my cancer is incurable, so this combination of drugs I'm taking will eventually stop working, and I will need new treatments. The importance, therefore, of innovation and new drug development is not theoretical for me. It's literally a matter of life and death. But my experience has taught me an irrefutable fact, and that is drugs don't work if people can't afford them. Now, of course, pharma tells us Build Back Better is going to bring innovation to a grinding halt. That's just not true. This bill does not alter the current incentives for innovation. Drug companies will still set launch prices and be protected from competition for 5 to 12 years when they can reap a healthy profit on their investment and risk to bring a new drug to market. And they'll be exempt from negotiation for 9 to 13 years after launch. We must not fall for pharma's fear-mongering. Instead, we need Congress to listen to the stories of patients who are making heart-wrenching, life-altering decisions every single day in order to afford the medications they need right now. The drug price reforms in Build Back Better enjoy overwhelming bipartisan support from more than 80% of voters. They will make our system work better for those it is intended to serve, patients and all Americans. We're calling on the Senate to pass the legislation, resist efforts by Big Pharma that are still going on to weaken this bill in any way. Millions of American lives depend on it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. I want to thank my 2 colleagues that have worked on this report and this issue, and also all of our panelists today, and Mindy especially for sharing your story. Are there any questions? Can you identify yourself and your publication, please? Well, there are other things that can be done, but we need to focus our attention and our strength in passing Build Back Better. We got it through the House. We now have to get it through the Senate. And this report is important for many reasons, but it also makes a case. It makes a case of why we have to pass this important bill. And we are focusing on the task ahead of us right now. We've been trying so hard for years, the Democrats, to pass a law, even before Build Back Better, that would allow us to negotiate for lower drug prices. We heard from our panelists, from the members of Congress, that we are paying 3, 4, 5 times more than other countries. I have constituents who go to Canada to buy their drugs because it is cheaper than America, even though the research took place here in America. The drug companies are here in America. The least that we can do is let Medicare negotiate for lower prices. It would make it more affordable and available for anyone and everyone in America. We are focused on making that happen. Leader Schumer had hoped to get this bill passed before Christmas in his statements, and we hope that he will be able to, because it is literally life-saving. We will continue our investigation on drugs, the cost of drugs, ways to make it more affordable for people. But right now, all of our energy needs to go into focusing 100% on passing Build Back Better. Are there any other questions? Well, I want to thank you for coming. And thank you for coming to the committee room. We're usually in the press room, but because of Dole's funeral, we can't be there, so I want to thank you for being here. I do want to thank the staff again, and Allie Golden is the head of this particular deal, and she can answer more questions further for your reporters. And Nellie Decker, where's Nellie? She's here, our press secretary. So thank you very much for coming. Wow.